Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. U.S. President Donald Trump's second term is already reshaping global dynamics. From renewed tensions over Greenland to the launch of a new peace council, key alliances and diplomatic frameworks are being tested. Europe is divided, traditional partners are uneasy, and middle powers, including South Korea, are facing increasing pressure to adapt. Against this backdrop, many are now asking, are we witnessing a temporary shakeup or the early signs of a new global order? For a deeper discussion on this, we connect to Youngshik Bong, Research Fellow at the Yonsei University Institute for North Korean Studies. A big welcome, Dr. Bong.
Thank you.
And also joining us is Christophe Gaudin, Professor of Political Science at Kookmin University. Good to see you, Professor.
Good to see you. Thank you.
So let's start a discussion with Dr. Bong. So from Greenland to Gaza, President Trump's second term seems defined by unilateralism, weakened alliances, and institutional reinvention. Do you think we're entering a fundamentally different phase of global diplomacy?
It depends on your definition of, fundamental. I like to see it as a great reshaping of post-war international order since 1945, at the end of the Second World War. It is reasonable to expect that post-war international order, which has been lasting for almost 80 years since 1945, would need retooling, resetting for its renewal and restoration of its sustainability. So Trump administration's America First foreign policy, how unprecedented and violent it might be, will serve some positive functions in terms of assisting the reshaping of post-war international order. It is premature for us to draw any hasty conclusion that Trump administration's global strategy is breaking down the fundamentals of the post-war international order, or it is kind of a growing pain, how violent and unsettling it might be for the better future of the international order. We've been here many times over in the past. When Richard Nixon administration decided upon reciprocal tariff in transgression of the open market capitalist international order and reduction of U.S. forces in South Korea and the decision to end the Vietnam War. Scholars and pundits concluded that the Nixon administration's foreign policy was the end of the post-war international system, but we have witnessed its renewal since 1970. So it is premature for us to make any conclusion at this point about the future of international order.
Right. We're not sure about the direction, but it's really a change, though, we're seeing. Building on that, Trump's pressure on NATO allies, such as Denmark, combined with talk of military options over Greenland, has unsettled even traditional partners. Professor Gaudin, we wonder, how is Europe reacting to this?
Long story short, Europe is reacting in an haphazard way, almost chaotically. And unfortunately, I think it could be argued that for the moment, it will be difficult for Europe to do better. Let me give you one figure, a figure I always like to remind my students. It is a fact that the US military expenditure alone represents almost just as much as the rest of the world combined. The US spends for the army just as much as all other nations in the world altogether, while Europe is no military power. There is only one country in Europe with nuclear power, which is France, but the French army is notoriously underfunded, the German army even more so, And all of these European powers have been relying on the US for their defense for way too long. And so the consequence is that in this case, Europe has been reacting with words, not really with weapons during this crisis. France, Germany, and a few other nations have detached troops in Greenland. France detached 15 soldiers, 15. Germany, 13. Norway, Sweden, two. So obviously, Europe is in no position to oppose anything to the US. Now, Europe, Korea, and other democratic nations are realizing that the US is not as reliable as they used to be, but they have nothing to replace the US. That's why, as Professor Bong mentioned earlier, where we are now is a time of transition. Will other democratic nations be able to somehow find an alternative to this reshaping Trump is trying to push for? Is Trump gonna fail because his ambitions are just unreasonable? We do not know. But to answer your question very simply, long story short, Europe will not react very convincingly, and Europe could not, because in international relations you need weapons, and Europe does not have weapons. As simple as that.
Right, definitely not in a good position right now. Now that America's growing strategic focus on Greenland, especially with Washington planning its Golden Dome missile system and expanding its Arctic footprint, it raises the question on whether the Arctic is becoming the next major theater of great power rivalry. What are your thoughts on this, Dr. Bong?
Well, thanks to the global warming, the Arctic and the Greenland area has been made more available to shipping activities, increased by 30%, according to some statistics. And its a geopolitical location would be a very important consideration for the Trump administration in terms of construction of more effective, more advanced missile defense system against potential adversaries, such as Russia and China, armed with a nuclear missile that can target the mainland of the United States. So it is a very important consideration for homeland security of the United States, especially for the Donald Trump administration that avowed building a new type of missile defense system, the Golden Dome, which would cause Washington to expend about 179 billion US dollars until 2029. And the excavation of precious metals, such as the rare earth, would be another important strategic consideration for the United States in its strategic competition with China, which occupies at least 70% of all the refined rare earth in the global market. So justifications are there. The problem is how you're going to do about it, even in violation of the sacrosanct principle of state sovereignty, linchpin of the global order since 1945. Then that would make the United States another imperialist power that it has defeated in the Second World War. So it is a very important question for the United States regarding its national identity. What kind of a global power, what kind of a country United States wants to become? If it's going to fall into the trap of imperialism, then that's exactly the type of the United States that global terrorists, including Osama bin Laden and his Al-Qaeda, with its attack on the United States on 9/11/2001, wants to see. So there's a danger of entrapment that the Trump administration has to avoid. It wants to avoid the trap of imperialist overstretch made by the George W. Bush administration in response to the 9/11 terrorist attack in 2001, which saps the long-term growth potential of the United States and which allows China to catch up with the United States in its strategic void left by two wars involving United States, one in Iraq and the other one in Afghanistan for 20 years. So Trump administration is basically walking on a very tight rope in practicing America First policy, and by isolating and insulting traditional allies such as European countries and South Korea and Japan, and then its America First policy may not really make America great again, but it's going to compel the United States to walk in the direction of the imperialist stretch and making the United States more and more like imperialist power that United States has not been.
So the pressure there, it's building, and we're now really seeing young Greenlanders voicing a willingness to enlist, something which was unthinkable before. Professor Gaudin, do you see this as a turning point in how small regions perceive their role in global security?
So, long story short, you're right. Yes, because now all nations, including the smallest nations, realize that in this violent world we're entering into, you're on your own. However, there is something specific in the case of Greenland. It is the fact that Greenland doesn't have an army of its own. Officially, the official denomination of Greenland is what you call an autonomous territory. So something like, for instance, Guam or Puerto Rico, for instance. What it means is that these territories are autonomous when it comes to education, culture, social, daily policies in general. But when it comes to the core of government policies, that is what matters the most, namely money, the currency, and the army, they are not free to do whatever they like. So what it means that when these young Greenlanders want to enlist, in reality, they are not to enlist in the Greenlandish, but in the Danish army. So this point is extremely interesting because it shows that when you're an isolated nation facing a bigger enemy, a bigger threat, like Greenland with America, Ukraine with Russia, Taiwan or Hong Kong with China, unfortunately, you cannot manage these such existential threats on your own. You need somehow to join some larger alliance. And what it means now in Greenland is that Greenlanders are realizing that they're under threat and they need to find allies. Greenland alone, it's 56,000 inhabitants, 56,000. Much less than, I don't know, Gyeonggi in Seoul. So you could not imagine Gyeonggi fighting back against the US invasion. It's impossible to envision.
Right, so it has already went beyond just symbolism, and we really have to change their tactics now. But meanwhile, this assertive approach from President Trump, it has drawn criticism even from far-right European leaders who once aligned with MAGA politics. Dr. Bong, could this mark a deeper fracture in the transatlantic populist alliance?
We've been hearing diverse voices coming from European leaderships and publics, not just a unified one voice. The NATO General Secretary clarified that European countries, as they are now, could not realize their core strategic interest without the military assistance of the United States. So the call for independent Europe from the United States is a good, slogan for aspiration, but very far away from harsh reality. On the other hand, based upon her speech at Davos Forum, Madame von der Leyen made clear that Europe needs to prepare itself from being independent from the United States. So we have two contrasting voices coming from the European Union. The balance between recognition of harsh reality and pursuit of aspirations for new order should be determined by individual member of the European Union and the European Union as a whole, which will be a very difficult choice in near future. But it is what it is. You have to deal with the reality as it is, not as what you hope it to be. So you have to deal with the Donald Trump administration as a Donald Trump administration, not something else. The only leadership that can change the mindset of the Trump administration is President Donald Trump himself. So the Greenland controversy is a very important case in point because the reason why President Donald Trump made a shift in his insistence upon U.S. acquisition of Greenland at the last moment is the resistance by the European countries actually made a huge impact on the stock market of the United States, especially the national treasury bonds. So you have to go after what is very important for the leadership of the United States in Washington, D.C., which is President Donald Trump himself. The reason why he postponed the imposition of reciprocal tariffs announced in April last year was that announcement actually, destabilized the stock market. So you have to make sure that Trump administration is going to see the destruction of its own self-interest by going after European interest and co-interest of other countries in the name of making the entire world safer. Because the justification of the U.S. acquisition of Greenland has been made by the increasing military threats from Russia and China. But in the eyes of the Greenlanders, the major threat is not coming from Moscow or Beijing, but from Washington. United States is going to make sure that its justification to make the world safe from existential threats from Russia and China can be supported and understood by the clients in European countries themselves.
Right, so we should be able to read between the lines of United States, words from coming out from the United States. Now, the latest incident, it's not really just the political alliances. It also shook intelligence sharing blocs like Five Eyes. They're also showing some strain regarding this. Professor Gaudin, are longstanding alliances built on trust now being replaced by kind of interest-based short-term alignments? Do you think so?
Yes and no. In fact, I could answer first cynically that great powers, so China, the US, Russia, they've always been imperialistic to some extent. What is happening with President Trump now is that in the past, the US used to behave like a democracy, which means that, of course, the US was pushing for their interests as all nations, but still the US used to abide by some rules. For instance, the US will not abduct the president of a sovereign state like Venezuela. The US will not threat to invade some foreign territory like Greenland, etc., etc. The way the US is behaving now makes the US closer and closer to Russia and China, And of course, the US is drifting apart, at least under this Trump administration, from the norms other democracies try to comply with. So to answer your question simply, what is happening is that most democracies, which means Europe, which means Japan, which means Korea, which means Brazil as well, most of these democracies try to resist. They try to keep some normalcy in international relations. What is happening is that Trump is trying to break this law and order based sort of relations. Trump, as you mentioned, basically wants to break all international institutions like the UN and replace them with short-term, interest-based sort of agreements, deals, as you would put them. My point here, however, is that us as journalists, as academics, that is, people whose job is to comment on the news, is to make sense of what is happening, I think we need not to let ourselves fall into President Trump's entrapment, as Dr. Bong put it before. It is important for us to look at things in a long-run perspective, and what we have now is more simple than it looks. It is one country, the US, under the presidency of one man, President Trump, trying to reshape the international order. It is way too soon to tell if he's going to succeed. On the opposite, when you look at the European Union, Korea, Japan, Brazil, South Africa, many middle powers, they've been trying to somehow defend this democratic international order. It is under attack, but it hasn't collapsed yet.
Right. So definitely.
I'd like to add to what Professor just said, that Trump administration may be correct in asserting that trust and democratic values and principles may be overrated. You have to be pragmatic and you have to be realistic to come up with an effective global strategy. But even you accept this assertion by the Trump administration of the United States that trust is overrated. But Trump administration's unilateralism and global strategy has not been consistent or clear. It goes back and forth. It argues, as mentioned in National Defense Strategy of 2026, Trump administration argues that the United States is not pursuing isolationism, but focused engagement overseas, clearly oriented toward advancing specific interests of the United States. But at the same time, it does not rule out use of force to punish partners that refuse to follow the leadership of the United States, like Canada or countries in Central and South America. Then this is not the policy of isolationism or focused engagement, but very expansive global strategy. So countries do not know where the United States under the leadership of the Donald Trump administration is standing. Sometimes it's isolationist, sometimes it's bullying, but sometimes it is very measured. Sometimes it's very expensive, including the bombing of the nuclear sites in Iran and the arrest of the Venezuelan president and the first lady. So without knowing where the United States stands, without knowing what constitutes the core national interest of the United States, even in the absence of trust or democratic values, other countries cannot work with the United States.
Right, so it's really an unpredictable and unsettling time for many of the states across the globe, but we'll have to see how this develops moving forward. But as for now, we'll have to end our discussion right here. Thank you so much for your insights, Dr. Bong.
Thank you.
And Professor Gaudin, we really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.